When Donald Trump told Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett to sit down, girl, during a live hearing, the entire room went still. She responded with such poise and sharpness, it left even his strongest supporters without words. Cameras kept rolling. The overhead lights buzzed steadily. The House Oversight Committee's hearing on federal transparency had already gone on for more than 5 hours, but the atmosphere remained tense. Journalists were glued to their phones. Aides whispered back and forth. Everyone sensed something was about to happen. Donald J. Trump sat at the main table, as relaxed as ever, flipping through a few sheets like he had nothing pressing to deal with. Wearing his usual dark blue suit and red tie, he looked like a man who had rarely been held to account, especially not by a black congresswoman from South Dallas, who clearly had no time for nonsense. Representative Jasmine Crockett, wearing a striking cobalt blazer and dark-rimmed glasses, adjusted her microphone and calmly addressed him, her eyes locked on Trump. "Mr. Trump," she began, turning a page, "can you explain why in your 2019 and 2020 disclosure session are major inconsistencies in the values of your overseas holdings?" Trump glanced up, leaned back, and gave a smug grin. He had been waiting for an opening like this. "I have been more open than anyone in this room," he replied, brushing off her question, "and honestly, your attitude is out of line." Crockett remained steady. "Respect is not about attitude, Mr. Trump. It is something you earn." A few murmurs echoed around the room. The camera zoomed in, and even the C-SPAN Livestrium chat started speeding up. Trump casually waved his hand, like brushing away a small nuisance. Then, with the same ease of someone used to saying whatever he pleased without consequence, he looked directly at her and said, "Sit down, girl." It hit the air like a stone. The room did not react, it paused. The chairman slowly lowered his gavel, unsure whether to call order or simply absorb what had just been said. Aides stopped mid-typing. A few Republicans looked down. Others raised their eyebrows, but no one made a sound. Crockett did not move immediately. She blinked once, then again. She let the silence hold. It was like watching someone navigate through shattered glass, every second building tension. She leaned in again, reached for the mic, and looked at him, not in rage, but with unshakable clarity. "Let me be clear, Mr. Trump," she said, her voice even and deliberate. "You may have spoken to women that way before, but I am not here for your comfort. I am here for the truth. And if my questions make you uneasy, the problem lies in your answers, not my tone." The silence grew heavier. Then, from behind her, a single aide whispered, "Damn." Crockett continued, unaffected. "And another thing, your habit of dodging facts with dismissive words is not strength. It is deflection. But you will not brush past me today." Trump stayed silent for a beat. He tapped a pen on the table, lips slightly parted, searching for a response, one that never came. The chairman finally broke in. "Mr. Trump, please answer the question." But the attention had already shifted. This was no longer just about financial reports or hidden foreign accounts. It had turned into something bigger, about authority, and who still gets to hold it without being challenged. Inside the media section, CNN and MSNBC staff scrambled. "Cut that clip," one producer said. "That is going to blow up online." And it did. In less than 15 minutes, the exchange was clipped, edited, and posted everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, even TikTok. The words, "Sit down, girl," were trending globally within the hour, but not in the way Trump might have hoped. Somewhere in Fort Worth, an elderly woman paused her ironing to watch the clip again, eyes wide, shaking her head. "Lord, have mercy," she whispered. That girl told him. But Crockett's words were not just a clapback. They hit something deeper, and that was when the mood began to change. You could feel it, that shift that happens when a line is crossed, and no one quite knows how to respond. That hearing room had seen its share of arguments over the years, people yelling, walking out, even crying. But this was different. The silence that followed was not about surprise, it was about understanding. Everyone in the room knew something important had just taken place. They just were not sure how to process it. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett did not raise her voice. She did not pound her desk. She did not even lean back once she was done. She simply sat there, steady, turning to the next page like Trump had not just tried to dismiss her with words that carried an old weight, a weight women like her knew all too well. A few seats over, Representative Monica Rayburn broke the silence. She looked at Crockett, then let out a long breath. She was not reacting to the insult alone, she was reacting to how it was handled. The calm, the precision, she whispered under her breath. That is how you deal with it. Across the room, Representative Neil Camden jotted something down in his notes, then leaned over to his aide. She just flipped this whole place, he whispered. Trump, on the other hand, looked different. His grin was gone. The usual confidence in his voice was missing. He did not look shaken, just irritated, maybe even unsure, like someone had just hit him with something he could not quite understand. Still, he tried to steady himself. I am just saying, he muttered, loud enough for the mic to catch. There is a respectful way to speak to people. But no one replied. Not right away. The moment had shifted. Now, the eyes were on him. And maybe that was what unsettled him most. The chairman tapped the gavel not to interrupt, but to keep the hearing moving. Let us continue, he said. Representative Crockett, the floor is yours. And it was on paper and in presence. Crockett went right on with her questioning. Same calm tone. She never brought up what just happened. She did not have to. The moment had spoken for itself. And it was already echoing far beyond Capitol Hill. The media vans were changing their headlines. Trump tells Representative Crockett sit down girl, intense hearing. In newsrooms, producers were shouting through headsets, drop the budget story. Go with Crockett. Get the full footage. In homes around the country, people were hitting rewind, watching again, sending the clip to their partners, forwarding it to coworkers. At a bar in Columbus, Ohio, two teachers were on their lunch break, sat in quiet disbelief. They watched the scene unfold on a muted television. One of them, Janice, mouthed the words. Did he really just say that? Her friend gave a small nod, eyes still locked on the screen. She handled that like a pro. In a dorm room in Tempe, political science major Malik Thomas opened his laptop and started a thread titled Why the Crockett Moment Means More Than You Think. By the next morning, it had already been shared over 90,000 times. Meanwhile, inside the Capitol, reporters gathered outside the chamber, waiting for the session to end. Everyone was hoping to catch Representative Crockett, but her staff had already secured her exit. She was not giving any comments, not today. She walked out quietly, aides by her side, not looking toward the cameras. Someone tried to call out a question, but she did not pause. Her posture said everything. She was not chasing headlines, she was doing her work. That evening, her communications lead, Kiara Owens, checked her phone and nearly dropped it. Over 2 million views in less than 4 hours. Trending hashtags, public figures quoting her words, civil rights groups requesting interviews. She looked over at Crockett, who was calmly reviewing a folder at her desk. You know they are calling that the line of the decade, right? Kiara said. Crockett did not look up. They can call it whatever they want, she said. I call it Tuesday. But while Crockett stayed focused, the country was just starting to take notice and the story was gaining momentum. Before she was Congresswoman Crockett, before the cameras, the trending posts, and the daily mentions, she was Jasmine. Raised in St. Louis, Missouri. Her mom worked night shifts at a health clinic, and her dad drove a school bus every day without fail. She grew up in a home where you stayed quiet, you had something real to say, and when you did speak, you said it like it mattered. She was never the loudest in the room, but when she talked, teachers would stop. Her classmates used to say Jasmine didn't argue, she cross-examined. At 16, she was already volunteering at the local courthouse, just to observe, not for credit, not for school. She simply liked the way truth sounded when it had no room to hide. Her journey into politics started in a courtroom in Texarkana, Texas. Right out of law school, she accepted a case no one else wanted. A young man, wrongly arrested, held for 3 days with no charges. He could not afford a lawyer. The city wanted it forgotten, but Crockett did not take the shortcut. She stayed up to nights reviewing records, exposing contradictions in reports, and speaking with witnesses no one had questioned. When she stepped into court and began her opening statement, the judge interrupted. Miss Crockett, "Are you sure you just graduated?" She smiled. "Only on paper." She won the case in under an hour. Word spread. That was her style, quiet victories that carried weight. Over the next 5 years, she became the person people turned to when nothing else had worked. Police abuse, housing disputes, eviction threats, she handled them, sometimes without pay, surviving on the few she could. Bill. By the time she ran for the State House, she was not just familiar, she was dependable. She did not sound like most candidates. She spoke like someone who had sat across the kitchen table from families who had no advocates, and that made a difference. When she won her seat in the Texas House, she was told to stay low, learn the rules, follow the path. She chose not to. In her first year, she introduced a bill that pushed back on harsh policing during public protests. It did not pass, but the hearings gained national attention. That was the first time C-SPAN viewers saw her in action, voice steady, hair tied back, surrounded by men. Twice her ajuho still could not get her to back off. Back in D.C., some party leaders began watching her clips with the sound off, just to observe her presence. She barely blinked, did not fidget, and only smiled when it meant something. When she finally ran for Congress, it was not about chasing titles, it was about reach. She wanted a bigger seat at the table because yelling from outside the room was no longer enough. And when she won, she sent a short note to her mother. It said, "You told me to make my voice count. I found a bigger mic." So when Trump told her to sit down, girl, in front of a national audience, she did not freeze. She had heard worse from judges, from police commanders, from rich developers who assumed she was someone's assistant. But she also understood something else: millions were watching. Girls who looked like her. Women who had been spoken over with that same careless tone for years. She did not raise her voice, did not slam papers or walk out. She just did what she always did, pointed to the truth, and let it sit there. And that is why the clip landed so powerfully. It was not just trending content. It was a result of years spent in courtrooms, in local offices, and late nights reviewing documents to help someone avoid eviction. Now, that entire journey had reached a space too public to ignore. But the cameras only showed the main exchange. They missed what happened after. Once the hearing wrapped at around 5:30 p.m., the real stir began as the broadcast ended. Inside the room, aides rushed to organize folders while reporters quietly approached lawmakers heading toward side doors. Security moved Trump out a separate exit, away from the gathering press waiting on the Capitol steps. Behind the raised bench, Jasmine Crockett calmly picked up her things, not slow, not hurried. A junior aide handed her a bottle of water. She accepted it, gave a quick nod, and stepped toward the corridor. She had not spoken about what happened. Not yet. But everyone else around her was talking. Down the hallway, Representative Elaine Brewster leaned against a marble wall, whispering into her phone, "Yes, I saw it live." No, she did not back down. "Yes, he actually said that." Meanwhile, in the media room 2 floors below, the scene was hectic. Dozens of journalists competed for leads, posts going up by the second. Need a confirmation. Did Trump really say, "Girl on mic"? Has Crockett issued a response? Is she booked on MSNBC tonight? Back upstairs, in a private meeting space off the floor, Trump was pacing, clearly upset. That woman, she was completely disrespectful. He snapped at an advisor. "I was answering the question." The advisor said nothing, just stood still, observing. A team of PR staff stood near the window, quietly debating whether to issue a response or let it settle. "Can we call it light banter?" someone asked. "No," someone else replied. The tone was wrong. She looked direct, serious. "You try to play it off as a joke, it will look worse," one aide said under his breath. "We should have seen it coming. She speaks like someone trained in court." Trump caught that. "What?" "It means she doesn't fall for traps," the aide replied. "She waits until you trip on your own words." Back in Crockett's office, her chief of staff Kiara paced while holding the phone to her ear. Every few seconds, it buzzed with another call. CNN, MSNBC, Reuters, BBC, even a French news outlet asking for comment. But Jasmine had not spoken. Yet, she was still sitting, quietly sipping from her water bottle. "I need to check in with her," Kiara said into the phone. "No, I do not know if she's going to make a public statement. I don't think she's approaching it that way. She glanced over. You all right? Jasmine looked up briefly. I'm fine. We didn't come here to make a moment. We came to ask real questions. Still, she knew this had grown bigger than just the hearing. Outside the Capitol, protesters were already arriving. Some held signs reading, "Respect Black women." Others wore shirts printed with her quote in bold letters. It happened fast. Someone had it on Etsy within a few hours. A reporter tried to stop her on her way out. Congresswoman Crockett, do you feel disrespected? She paused, turned to the mic, and simply said, I feel focused. That clip alone was enough to lead every morning show across the networks. Meanwhile, in right-leaning circles, the spin had already begun. Talk radio shows kept replaying the moment, suggesting Trump's tone was friendly. Others tried shifting the focus. What about her attitude? One host yelled. What about her tone? But that angle was slipping. This was no longer just about tone. It was about a bigger pattern. In progressive media, the response was clear. Black women don't get to have off days, one columnist wrote. They get told to sit down, no matter how capable, composed, or correct they are. Meanwhile, Crockett's inbox flooded with messages. Some were critical, many were supportive. One stood out. It read, you did not raise your voice. You did not back down. You did not blink. My daughter just asked me your name. That means something. Thank you. She read that one 3 times. Still, inside her office, the media storm only grew louder, and Trump's team was not staying quiet. By evening, their media response machine was fully active. The clip had exploded online, yes, but they had no plans to let that be the end of it. Not without a pushback. In a modern office suite in Arlington, a group of communication staff gathered around a screen, watching the clip for the 15th time. She didn't raise her voice, one aide pointed out. She stayed composed. That's going to make it tougher for us. Then we spin it, another replied. Say he was being casual. Say she misread the tone. An intern hesitated. But it doesn't sound casual. Everyone turned to. Look. Silence. Back in Florida, watching from Mar-a-Lago on a private stream, Trump leaned back. People will forget in a week, he said. We just need something loud to bury this. The plan came together quickly. Distract, discredit, and double down. First came tweets from allies. Statements defending Trump's approach. One senator wrote, that moment wasn't offensive. It was political drama, and Rep. Crockett knows how to play for the cameras. A pundit tweeted, this is what happens when we can't speak freely. Without someone pulling the race card. The next morning, Trump went on a conservative radio show in Palm Springs. The host asked directly, do you regret what you said to Representative Crockett yesterday? Trump laughed. Regret? No. I was trying to get through a long hearing. She kept going, so I said what I said. People are too touchy, but do you think the way you phrased it? I said nothing wrong, he cut in. And you know what? A lot of people agree with me. They just won't say it out loud. He grinned, as if that settled it. But the fallout was still spreading. At the same time, Crockett had not spoken further apart from that one remark outside. Her silence spoke louder than any press release. People were waiting for a reaction. Instead, she gave them focus. That night, on CBS, political analyst Trevor Langford summed it up. This is not just about a phrase. It is about a pattern, he explained. About a man in power for years who still acts like power gives him a pass. In Texas, local news started running segments titled Who is Jasmine Crockett?, highlighting her background, her legal work, and her track record. People who had never heard of her were now paying attention. At the same time, her team was flooded. Every outlet wanted her. The Today Show, CNN, NPR, even late-night shows. But Crockett was careful. She was not interested in a media blitz. She wanted the hearing to speak for itself. She told her team, this is not just about what he said, it's about how I answered. That part is important. Still, online backlash was growing. Fake quotes, edited pictures, old, unrelated clips made to look recent, painting her as rude, loud, or aggressive. One video stitched together moments where she interrupted in hearings, trying to make her seem confrontational. It gained traction among far-right groups. But the wider story was not shifting. For every false edit, there were several real clips showing her being steady, precise, and unmoved when it counted. A young reporter named Maya Latin summed it up in the Arizona Times. "We do not ask men to tone down to be heard, but we ask women to smile through being ignored." Crockett did not smile. She did not raise her voice. She corrected, and that correction landed stronger than yelling ever could. Trump's supporters got louder, but it started to feel like noise voices yelling over a crowd that had already stopped listening. Even Trump could sense this was not fading. While his team tried to switch the topic, the public was already moving to a new discussion. One Crockett no longer had to lead, because she had already started it. By day 3, it was everywhere. Morning news gave one version. Comedy shows gave another. University professors began discussing it in ethics lectures. On one end, conservative voices argued identity politics were being used. On the other, progressives said it was long-awaited accountability. Somewhere in all that, something shifted. People began listening. This was not about policy, not taxes or foreign affairs. It was not really about Trump anymore. It was about the moment, the words, and what they meant. In Birmingham, Alabama, a high school debate teacher, Lorraine Reeves, played the video clip for her class and paused. "Tell me what you noticed," she said. A girl in the front raised her hand. He did not think she would answer like that. Another added, "It was like he thought she would just let it go." The class nodded. In Des Moines, Iowa, a retired librarian named Tom Beck wrote a short Facebook post that quietly went viral. He wrote, "I am 76. I have seen a lot of hearings, controversies, and speeches. But this was not about left or right. It was about whether those in power can keep talking to others like they do not belong." That post was shared more than 20,000 times. In Phoenix, a woman named Farah Densley, who had never followed politics, uploaded a short clip explaining why Crockett's response made her cry. Her voice shook as she said, "My daughter is going to grow up in a world where she will hear a sentence like that, understand it fully, and know exactly how to respond." Even comedians weighed in, but not only with jokes. During a set on The Hamilton Show, stand-up comic Will Ortega said, "She didn't snap back. She didn't lash out. She spoke the truth, and that is what shook people. The truth spoken calmly by a black woman they did not expect to push back." Still, the divide remained. Crockett's congressional inbox flooded. Thousands of messages arrived. Many were encouraging, some were not. One simply read, "You're what's wrong with this country. Sit down," just like he said. She did not respond. She never did to those, but her team felt the weight. Kiara, her communications director, scrolled through the inbox late one night and softly said, "It is always louder when they feel noticed." "Yeah," Crockett said from across the room. Silence is what shields them. By now, social media had embraced Crockett as both example and standard. Black women shared her words in Instagram captions. Young girls posted her photos alongside other groundbreaking women in politics. On Twitter, users broke down the phrase, "sit down girl," like a case study in how power plays out in America. But this was no longer just online talk. Things changed when a group of middle-aged women in Spokane, Washington, started a handwritten letter campaign to thank her. By week's end, more than 300 envelopes had arrived. Then came polling. One independent survey showed a rare rise in approval for Crockett among voters aged 40 to 60 across party lines. More unexpectedly, nearly 40% of self-identified independents said her response made them want to hear more about her views on policy. That was when it became clear this was more than a social media trend. This had struck a deeper chord. In private, Crockett kept her circle close. She did not cry. She did not rant. But she did call her father one evening. "You sounded like your mama in that hearing," he told her. She laughed. "She would have thrown a shoe." "Ah," he replied. She'd have made him give it back first. It was a rare laugh in a week that had grown heavier than anyone had expected. Because even as the country debated, analyzed, defended, and posted, one thing stayed the same. Crockett did not ask for this moment. She just refused to step away from it. And no one predicted that a quiet, direct answer would spark something much bigger. A few days later, she received a handwritten note from someone she had never met. 3 days after the hearing, the conversation was no longer just about Jasmine Crockett or Donald Trump. It had started to spread to the parts of American life that are rarely discussed on national news. People were not just sharing or liking anymore. They were talking about what it really means to be heard, especially when you are not the expected voice in the room, especially when that room holds power. In an auditorium at a university in Boulder, Colorado, Professor Shelby Gaines stood before a full classroom. Chalk in hand, she replayed Crockett's hearing moment. "This," she said, circling the word truth on the board, "is what calm looks like when it stands next to power." A student raised his hand. "Why did it go so viral?" "He has said worse things." Professor Gaines nodded. "Because sometimes it's not the words, it's where they are said, who they're said to, and who refuses to back down." Meanwhile, back in Dallas, Reverend Carl Winston gave a Sunday sermon with no notes. He walked the aisles of his small church, his voice filled with emotion. "They told her to sit down," he said, "but she stood firm in her truth. And that, church, that is resistance." Not far from there, at a black-owned coffee shop near South Lamar, regulars debated over lattes and headlines. "She handled it perfectly," one woman said, stirring her tea. "She didn't give them a soundbite, she gave them a reflection." "But what if she had fired back harder?" her friend asked. "Would it have hit stronger?" "No," said a man at the counter, turning around. "You know why that moment struck a chord? Because she understood strength does not always need volume." Naturally, not everyone saw it that way. Some tried twisting the moment to suit their own agendas. On cable networks, a few analysts called it an overreaction. One guest on a popular morning show even suggested, "Maybe that is just his way of speaking. Should we not give him the benefit of the doubt?" That clip also made rounds but was quickly met with strong pushback. While televised debates carried on, real experiences began surfacing. Stories from women, especially black women who had been ignored in meetings, spoken over while sharing ideas, or called "girl" by men with less background but more authority. An assistant principal in El Paso uploaded a video saying she had been called that word 5 times in her job, never by a student, always by someone in a suit. A healthcare executive in Portland penned a column in her local newspaper. The title read, "I was told to calm down, girl, during a budget meeting. I was the CFO." These stories flowed like water breaking through a long-held dam. It was not sudden anger, but years of quiet frustration finally finding a voice. And through all this, Crockett avoided the spotlight. She passed on major media interviews and did not cast herself as a victim. Her only public response came during a Q&A with a local reporter in Austin. "Do you think he meant to be disrespectful?" the journalist asked. Crockett took a moment and then said, "I believe intent matters less than outcome. And if someone cannot see the weight behind their words, maybe they should not be speaking for the public." That sentence carried just as much weight as the original comment from the hearing. In Detroit, civil rights leaders started organizing Speak It sessions for young women of color. Their first flyer said, "You do not need to shout to have power. You need to be understood." In Tallahassee, at a school board gathering, a high school student named Jaya read Crockett's quote aloud before pitching a student-led ethics group. The room stood and clapped. Behind all this, political commentators began to murmur about the 2028 elections, not because Crockett said anything but because something in the conversation had shifted. And her name sat right at the center of it. Kiara, her communications director, made a joke one night while reviewing incoming messages. "You know people are printing your quote on coffee mugs now?" Crockett barely looked up. "I just hope they spell it right." "You're not moved by any of this?" Kiara asked. Crockett replied, "What moves me is that more people are finally paying attention, not to me but to each other." But what neither of them could have seen coming was the email that came in later that evening. It was not from a news outlet, or a supporter, or an elected official. It came from someone who knew exactly what it felt like to be told to stay quiet and chose instead to speak up. Near midnight, Kiara noticed it, hidden among dozens of media invites and press briefings. Its subject line read, "Thank you from Tulsa." There was no signature, no title, No social media handle, just a brief message from someone named Clara Bishop. Kiara opened it, expecting another polite note. But as she read it, she froze. Dear Representative Crockett, I saw the hearing. I have watched that moment 5 times now. I am 68 years old. I have never written to any elected official before. When he told you to sit down, I heard my high school principal back in 1973 say, "You are not the kind of girl who gives speeches." When you looked up and answered him without shouting, without stepping back, without brushing it off, I felt like I was 17 again. I felt seen. You did not just speak for yourself. You spoke for every woman who was told to keep quiet because the truth made people uneasy. Thank you. With deep respect, Clara Bishop, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Kiara did not send it forward right away. She sat quietly with it. The next morning, she handed Crockett her phone. "Please read this," she said gently. Crockett read it silently, then placed the phone on the table. "Do you want me to write her back?" Kiara asked. Crockett paused for a moment. "No, I want to meet her." 3 days later, Crockett's team arranged a visit. No press, no public notice, just a simple meeting at a public library in downtown Tulsa. When Clara arrived, wearing a plain tan coat and holding a well-used notebook, Crockett stood up and smiled. "I am not here today as a congresswoman," she said. "Just Jasmine." Clara smiled in return. "And I am not 68 today. I am 17. You gave me that." They spoke for over an hour. No assistants, no journalist. Clara shared stories of growing up in segregated areas, of watching leaders rise and fall, of being passed over by men she had trained herself. "I stopped raising my hand," she said. "Felt like it did not matter anymore." Crockett listened carefully, leaned forward, asked questions. At one point, Clara unfolded a clipping from an old newspaper featuring Shirley Chisholm. "When I was young," she said, "we believed she would be the one to break every barrier." Crockett nodded. "She broke through. Now, we work to widen that space." When the conversation ended, they hugged. Nothing planned, nothing staged. Clara's granddaughter, who had driven her there, snapped a quick photo, just the two of them, standing by the library window, laughing. She posted it online that evening with the caption, "My grandma met her hero today." They did not talk about elections. They talked about truth. The picture quickly gained attention. By the end of the week, it had been reposted by Ava DuVernay, Tracee Ellis Ross, and Sherilyn Afil, each adding their own words about legacy, heritage, and quiet strength. Clara Bishop, who had never once used social media, was suddenly a trending name. When CNN covered the story, their headline read, "The letter that spoke volumes without a mic." Interview offers came pouring in. Clara turned down everyone. She agreed only to write a column for the Tulsa Sentinel, her local newspaper. It was titled "The Day I Felt Heard." In it, she described Crockett not as a lawmaker, but as a reflection, a mirror showing a country too used to turning its head. Meanwhile, Crockett made no public announcement about the meeting, no video for her campaign, no press image. When asked weeks later in an interview, she said simply, "Some moments belong to the people who live them, not the ones who saw them." That sentence became the top headline across 3 major political blogs the next day. One message, one meeting, one picture. It all reminded people that change does not always need a big stage. Sometimes, it begins with a quiet message that reaches someone who thought no one was listening anymore. But while that story settled in the hearts of many, something else had started to move this time, inside the very building where it all began. The House of Representatives does not shift quickly, not for headlines, not for public reaction, not even to fix its own image. But this time felt different. 1 week after the exchange, the Ethics Committee quietly called a closed-door emergency session. No reporters, no briefings, just 12 members from both sides of the aisle, watching the same clip again and again. "Sit down, girl." Pause. Then Crockett's reply. Silence. Even those who normally brushed off public image admitted this one could not be ignored. It was not just a public relations mess, it was a moment that made the entire chamber feel responsible. Some representatives wanted to move on quietly, others, especially those seeking re-election, pushed for an official statement, not directly against Trump, but against using disrespectful language toward any member. regardless of gender or background. It was a small step, but it opened the door, or the House floor. Quiet talks began about updating procedures. Ideas started to surface about setting clearer rules for how witnesses engage with members. One idea even called for mandatory briefings for former presidents before they testify because apparently, that is necessary now. Beyond politics, the shift could be seen elsewhere. Crockett received invites to speak first at Stanford School of Government, then Harvard Law, then unexpectedly from a community college in Jackson, Mississippi. She said yes to all. At Stanford, she began not with the story from the hearing, but one from her first housing case as a public defender. These people weren't looking for headlines, she said. They were looking for someone who could speak clearly, listen closely, and make space for truth in places where it is often ignored. At Harvard, her topic was tone: how women of color are often told they are too loud, even when speaking, gently, too bold, even when asking fair questions. In Jackson, she left her notes and asked the audience directly, what do you do when someone tells you to sit down quietly, coldly, or politely? A student near the front answered, you stand anyway. Crockett nodded. Exactly. Even if your legs are shaking. Back in Washington, younger lawmakers started picking up her language in their own meetings. It was not imitation, it was permission. A shift in attitude. Being direct no longer felt harsh. Being honest no longer felt like a risk. Crockett kept her focus. In the weeks that followed, she introduced two bills, one about transparency in federal contracting, and another protecting people during emergency detentions. Neither was tied to the hearing, but both came from the same belief: truth belongs in the open. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Trump was still angry. At a fundraiser in Pensacola, he claimed the hearing was rigged, the video unfair, that Crockett had an attitude. When a donor asked if he regretted his words, he laughed and changed the subject. Life moved on. Crockett's team kept busy, so many letters and invitations they could barely keep up. But one thing stood out: the tone had changed. It was not just praise or politics, it was reflection. One letter came from a woman in Santa Fe. I have worked in finance for 20 years. I have been called girl more times than I can count. I never said anything. After watching you, I walked into my boss's office and told him, use my name. Just my name. That felt like a win. Another came from a teenage boy in Oregon. I showed your video to my mom. She cried. I didn't understand why until she told me stories about how people treated her at work. Now I get it. Thank you. Crockett read each message. She did not keep the headlines. She kept the letters. But while lawmakers debated and stories were passed around, one quiet question remained in the background. What does respect look like when no one is watching and the attention is gone? The clip eventually faded from the trending pages. New scandals, new headlines took over. But the moment stuck with many, not for the attention it got, but for what it revealed and asked of us. In the months after, Representative Jasmine Crockett never once used the phrase viral moment to describe what happened. She never called it historic, never leaned into fame, never gave the press a polished story with a beginning, middle, and a clean finish. Because Crockett understood something most do not. Real change does not happen in the spotlight. It happens in quiet spaces, in the everyday choices people make about how to show up. She kept doing the work, attending hearings, asking sharp questions, writing bills most people will never read, but that will improve real lives. She met with locals in church basements, shopping plazas, and school gyms, answering questions about housing, healthcare, and transport as though nothing viral had ever occurred. And that earned her deeper respect, not the quick attention or the headlines, but her steady presence. She did not turn the moment into branding. She let it be an example, a moment that showed what it means to stand your ground without turning your voice into a weapon. That is what stayed with people. A teacher in Flagstaff said it best during a parent meeting. My daughter watched that clip. She did not see someone being talked down to. She saw a woman who answered like she knew exactly who she was. That matters now, especially in a world full of overreaction. Crockett's calm stood out because here is the truth: there are still far too many spaces in this country where respect is not shared equally. Too many meetings where some people are expected to stay quiet. Too many moments where those in charge expect silence, not honesty. But moments like this do more than reveal the gaps. They show us who is willing to stand their ground without hesitation. Crockett did not win a fight that day. She did not silence anyone or shut anything down. What she did was remind us what real strength looks like. It is not always loud. It is not always full of fire. Sometimes it is calm. Sometimes it is letting someone reveal themselves while you stay steady. And sometimes it is simply saying, "You cannot speak to me that way." Straightforward, confident, unmistakable. So, what can we take from this? Maybe this: if you truly know yourself, you do not have to prove it in every moment. You just need to remain steady. When someone tries to bring you down, do not respond with the same energy. Stay with yours. Because over time, people will notice the contrast. They will remember how you held firm, how you stayed calm, how you spoke clearly without being harsh, and that will stick with them. So whether you are in a courtroom, a classroom, an office, or sitting in a live hearing, speak with clarity. Ask the questions that count. And when someone tries to talk down to you, respond with something they will not forget, because that is how truth moves. And if this story made you think, if it reminded you of someone in your life, or of something you experience, or a time you stayed quiet when you should have spoken, do not stop here. Pass it on. Keep the conversation going. And subscribe for more content that looks beyond the surface. We are not chasing the noise. We are focused on what truly matters.